I've been meaning to make this video for a long time now. And I've mentioned on the podcast before and in some YouTube videos that I made that I have a huge ranking and tier list for all the Harry Potter books. And I have a bunch of different lists that I have, which is like best written, my current favorite, my all-time favorite, the first time I read it, those favorites. And so what I want to do right now is go through 6 of those lists that I have, some of the main 6 lists, and talk about what I think are the best and the worst Harry Potter books. Now, this is what normal fans I think would rank. I might be completely wrong in this, but just from all the fans that I've gathered and scouring over Reddit for a little bit, this is what I think all fans would rank the Harry Potter books in order of worst to greatest. I think it's pretty unanimous that people enjoy Chamber of Secrets the worst. It's not a bad book at all. Every one of these books is a masterpiece. I love it. But this one is maybe the least exciting for a lot of people. I think after that, a lot of people love the intro into book 1. It's just a phenomenal intro. But compared to the other 5, this one just seems to be lacking at times. Generally, this is the ranking that I've seen. After that, it goes 5, mainly because this book is agony to get through. Even though I think it's a masterpiece, I think people struggle getting through the Umbridge chapters, which to be honest are complete and utter agony. It's painful to read those. Then this is a surprising one, but I think a lot of people would rank Deathly Hallows as the next one. This is interchangeable with potentially Prisoner of Azkaban. These two I've seen flip-flopped the most out of the entire list. Some people like Deathly Hallows more, some people like Prisoner of Azkaban more, but more often than not, I think I see people liking Prisoner of Azkaban more than I see people liking Deathly Hallows. And then the same thing is kind of true with the last two. Goblet of Fire is generally ranked as one of the top 2, but I see Half-Blood Prince ranked as the best book pretty much consistently almost across the board for a lot of these like all-time favorite lists that I've seen. Now, everyone might disagree with this, but this is kind of just generally my take on what I think the general population of Harry Potter community would rank these books. Now, how do I reset this? Oh my gosh, there we go. No, that's annoying. So I have a bunch of different rankings, and I want to talk about my favorite the first time I read these books, because I remember a lot of the first time that I read these books, and I want to talk about that first time that I remember starting to read these books, what I loved about them. And unfortunately, Chamber of Secrets is going to be last on almost every single one of my lists. Chamber of Secrets is a great book, and I love it so much, but compared to the other 6, this book just, it wasn't, I think it's the weakest out of all of them. And I think it's the weakest out of all of them for a few different reasons I'm going to share for different lists that I have. So this is my least favorite, or this was my least favorite the first time I read it. Then, surprisingly, book 1. And I don't say that because it was bad, but because I don't remember it very, very clearly. I remember these other ones a lot clearer than I remember my first time reading through the first book, which is actually strange. I remember the first book really caught my attention, but I sped through it, got through the second book, got through the third book, which piqued my interest again, which I'm going to talk about that in a second. But after that, I remember this Order of the Phoenix was agony to get through. I love that book so much because that was where I caught up with the Harry Potter series, but it was absolute agony to get through because all I wanted every single page was Umbridge to get rid of. I just wanted someone to kill Umbridge, or like she just got what she deserved, or whatever it was, because she was agony to deal with in these chapters. I still remember every single page I flipped, every chapter that I flipped to, I would just hope that she was out of it. I would do this one thing whenever I read Harry Potter. I remember I did this for the first time, that I wasn't allowed to look at the chapter art for the next chapter, but I always, so this is going to be confusing. I never was able to look at the chapter art for 2 chapters in the future, but I was able to look at it as soon as I covered one chapter. Like if I was on chapter 2, I could look at the chapter art for chapter 3, but I couldn't look at the chapter art for chapter 4. So it was like a fun little weird game that I had. And I remember every single time hoping that the chapter art would give me a clue as to if she was out of the book or not. It was just agony. I hated having her in that book so much. Then after that, book 4 was a fun read. It was super fun. It was like very adventurous, and this is kind of where the book takes a turn. But compared to these other 3, I just don't think it was like, the book for me. Book 7, I remember just, I think I read this in 2 days the first time I had it, because I just scanned through. I remember I was sitting at soccer practice, or I was playing soccer one day, and I remember I think I had a game actually, and I was playing in the game, and I was just hoping that I could finish the game so I can get back to reading that book. I hated it at the moment. I just wanted to get home and sit on my couch and finish this book. That book was a phenom to read. I loved reading that one. Order of the Phoenix, or not Order of the Phoenix, Half-Blood Prince was also a phenom to read. I loved that book so much. It was so fun to read that for the first time. And I'm going to do this so I can just keep not resetting. And then Prisoner of Azkaban, shockingly, was, I think, my favorite the first time I read it. And I say that because I love Quidditch, and this book is very Quidditch-centric. And I still remember reading that for the first time, like going over, you're kind of like 15 chapters in, and it seems like it's wrapping up. But then you have like a third of the book left, and you're like, where is this going to go? This book was so exciting to me. I was like enthralled by how she could capture me so well on that book. I was just into that one. So that was my favorite the first time I read it. Presentation mode. Look at that. Look at that. That really doesn't do much for me, but we'll just stick on that. Now I want to talk about what I think is actually, what do I want to do? Let's do the best thematic book. And this is a weird category that I have, but I think the themes that each of these books touches on are really, really interesting and important. And I want to talk about the major themes that each of them have. I think the second book is the weakest thematically, although I think I think all of these are thematically brilliant books. There are themes of popularity and what Harry would have become had he grown up in the wizarding world that I think are phenomenal in this book. The loyalty, like the background that you get on Tom Riddle, the themes in this book are fantastic, but I just think it's the weakest out of the entire series. After that, I think 4 is actually the weakest thematically. This is just very much adventure and action. There are really mature themes, and this is them growing up and kind of like losing their innocence. But thematically, compared to these other ones, I think this is the weakest, or one of the weakest, the second weakest. This is going to be a hot take. I think 6 verges on not... Okay, this is where my tier list has a break. The first, Chamber of Secrets and Goblet of Fire, are a hard break. After that, all of these are thematic geniuses. I love the themes in all of these. But this one has themes that go into Voldemort's background, and it also has themes of how the kids want to just live normal life, and then Harry just has to accomplish all these insane tasks. Like, the themes in this book are good. It's about betrayal and loyalty and being a coward versus what really that is, and Dumbledore's death. It's a great thematic book. But compared to these other ones, and I think what the themes of some of these other books have, I just don't think this is the perfect one. For Prisoner of Azkaban, I think this is ranking higher than Half-Blood Prince because Azkaban's themes, I think, are... I'm not going to say they're more serious than Half-Blood Prince, but at the time when I was reading them, I remember for the first time, the stakes for Prisoner of Azkaban felt so serious. Harry finally coping and understanding his parents' death in a different way from the first and the second book. This is where he really confronts it. And he gets angry and he wants to kill someone for killing his parents. And he really mourns the loss of his parents in this book, which is really tragic. So the themes in this book are phenomenal. What it means to be a prisoner and what it means to be set free, what it means to have an innocent person die. Or potentially die. This brings about the themes of Dementors, which are really, really vital in the entire series for what depression is. I think this book is kind of where it introduces Harry's depression into the entire series too, which I think is fantastic writing. Then after that, I think thematically, book 1, and I will say book 1 thematically is the best for one simple chapter, which is I think the best written chapter in the entire Harry Potter series, even though I will say that Deathly Hallows has probably 3 out of the top 5 best written chapters. Ooh, I should do that. I should do a chapter tier list. But the Mirror of Erised chapter in this, I think, is one of the most beautiful written chapters in the entire series. I think it is. I read that and I get teary-eyed every single time I read it. It is a perfect chapter. and it shows Harry's longing and desire. Even though he doesn't confront it with anger as he does in Prisoner of Azkaban, it shows his longing and desire to have family and to have people around him that he wants. This chapter alone sets the stage for the entire rest of the series in a perfect way. It showcases this. I think that chapter alone really shows us the true character of Harry, what he's actually like, and what we expect from him in the rest of the series. And this book just did it for me. It was so good. After that, Deathly Hallows gets second, and I think the themes in Deathly Hallows, every single chapter, I think it deals with something different in like a different major way. I think when they're going and they're choosing between Horcruxes and Hallows, the theme of death and what death actually implies in this series versus like what you should not be welcoming death, but the difference between a Death Eater and between like the Hallows, I think is a really fascinating discussion. And all the themes that come at the end with even like the quotes that are on the graves with about friendship and about the last enemy to be defeated is death. This book does, I think, a really well job of, and this might sound strange, but being underwritten. Like the themes in this book are so embedded in it and so underwritten that I think it actually shines so much more because she assumes that you're really smart and that you get these concepts in this book. Doesn't spell everything out for you perfectly. And that obviously the end themes of resurrection and dying for your loved ones and like sacrifice and what real love actually looks like. The themes of this one are the culmination of the series, and I think she just tied it together really well. But I think Order of the Phoenix thematically is the best book. And I say that because this brings about so many different themes of loneliness, which I think the whole series delves into in minor ways, but I think this one goes into it in the most depth. It deals with loneliness, about how someone experiences death and what that really means for that person, and like how you really see the world in a different view when you've seen something traumatic like that, and how very few people sometimes can understand that. But every once in a while you run into someone like a Luna or a Neville who actually understands what you're going through, and it makes you feel less lonely. And I think this book has just immense beauty to it. I think this book is just an absolute marvel. It is absolutely fantastic. Why can't I just drag them back down here? All right, well, we're going to just kind of keep this up. I don't want to reset it and delete all those things. So the next one I'm going to go through is what I think is the best written. I have, I'm going to go through 3 more lists. So hang on with me. 3 more lists. This is what I think is the best written books. And I'll go through these maybe a little faster. I think 2 is the worst written book. It's a really well written book. And at this point, she was still listening to her editors a little bit. But she had gained so much popularity from the first one that this is kind of where you see it crumbling a little bit, where like she is doing things that her editors don't want her to do. And for a fan, I will say I want unedited versions of all of these books. I want more information, but I am talking specifically about the writing in these books in this instance, not about the themes, not about like how she, creates the story. It's simply about the words on the page. I think book 2 is maybe the weakest, although it is debatable. If we're just talking strictly about the words on the page and how she writes and her writing style, this book could get bumped up a little bit. But then after that, I think 3 is maybe the worst written. I'm just going to go through this one quick. 3, and then 7, and then 4, and then I would say 5, 6, 6. I have this list over to my other hand. 6, 5, 1. Gosh, this list is all over the place. 6, 5, 1. And I want to talk about it just having all these laid out. 1 is the best written book. I don't think that there's any question with that. And all of these, like for how this is going to be a combination of everything. I just talked about it's only about the words on the page, but it's incorporated a little bit more than that. It's the words on the page. It's also how she writes a story and how she's able to capture her audience through her writing. I think Order of the Phoenix is a marvel because she captured her audience. And even though I was in agony of reading that entire book, I still didn't want to put it down because I was holding on with everything in me. It wasn't like I was excited to get to the next page. I was in agony trying to flip through the next page, hoping that the story got better. The same thing is kind of true with Half-Blood Prince. The writing was just really, really exquisite because she kept, like, the pacing of this book was perfect. She just kept you going from one page to the other. I remember reading this book, and every single time that I read it now, it still feels fresh and new to me, because the pacing of this book is just exceptional. The pacing of this book is not great. Everyone makes a comment to that. The pacing of this book isn't good, but I think it's a marvel that she keeps you reading, even though the pacing isn't all that good. The pacing drags out for a specific reason, that she wants you to hate Umbridge even more, which is a great writing implement and a great writing device. I think Goblet of Fire is a masterpiece as well. I think the pacing here is good. I just don't think it's quite as good as Half-Blood Prince. I think Deathly Hallows is a really well-written book, and it's a great synopsis and like finishing point for the series. But as far as the writing is concerned, I think, again, there are chapters here that are brilliant. This is the largest spectrum of the book. There are chapters in this book that are the best written chapters that she's ever done, and there are chapters in this book that are some of the worst written chapters that she's ever done. And I think there's not a ton of middle ground. There's either really, really good stuff in this book, or I think it just falls flat for the writing style. I think book 1 is the best written book because she listened to her editors, and as far as just a writing style is like concerned, the pacing of this book is perfect. The writing style of this book is perfect. She doesn't use a ton of like adjectives in her writing, which just makes it clear and concise. She was very clear in what she was communicating in this book. She knew exactly where she was going. The story and just how it weaves through different things. This is like truly like a kid's story where you read every single night before you go to bed. And it just, every chapter, it's like a cliffhanger. I think this is her best written book. And that's kind of more concerning writing and story than it is like a large narrative arc of the entire series. Now, I'll talk about my favorite, two more tier lists. Gosh, my favorite at the moment versus my favorite all time. And I'm going to go through my favorite at the moment. Chamber of Secrets is always my least favorite. I hate it. I love this book a ton. But every time I read it, I'm almost excited to get through it because I really do love Prisoner of Azkaban. That's like my next favorite. So it goes Chamber of Secrets, Philosopher's Stone, which again, I love. It's such a fun entry point into the series. And it just does wonders for me. I love revisiting this book every single time I read it. But when I go through the series, I finish these first two, and I am so excited to get through the rest of them because the rest of them are just marvels. They're so good. So I would say 2. This is going to be a controversial one. It's 2, 1, then 3, and then 4, which is a controversial one for a lot of people because 4 is usually the top 2 for people. But for me, book 4 is right here. I love Prisoner of Azkaban, and it was good. But at the moment when I read this, I love Quidditch, and I will always love Quidditch. But these other 4, like my last read, which is last year, these other 4 just were so fun to get into and so fun to like get into the entirety of the scope of the story. It was just so much fun. 4 was my current favorite after that, and this is really boring. It literally goes 4, then 5, then 6, and then 7. And this is the reason why my ranking is like this. I read these books for the first time with people, or I read these books with people who have never read them. So they are reading through it for the first time. And the last read that I did it with Lizzie, and I did it when she was essentially reading it for the first time. And the reason why my books are almost in sequential order, and these are my favorite at the moment, is because I think the story arc of this is so well done. Like the callbacks that she has to certain things, how she ties up the majority of her loose ends in this story, and just how the story like marches through every single chapter, and we're getting small little chunks of information and then larger chunks of information. And in Deathly Hallows, it feels like they're like, I wish Deathly Hallows was longer, because sometimes it does kind of feel like she wrapped things up really quickly in a short amount of time. Like I would have loved that last day to be like 20 more chapters because it was so interesting to me. But the movement of this entire series and how she moves through each single book and like the entirety of the story, and especially if you're reading it for a first time, there's so much excitement with every book that comes after it. I kept telling this to Jen and Danny and Kristen, who were my first guests on the podcast. When they were reading for the first time, almost after every chapter or after every chunk of chapters that I talked about, I said, oh, this is where it gets really good. This is where it gets really good. Because that's really the truth with, I think, the Harry Potter books. Every single chapter you pass, you're like, I'm excited for the next one. I can't wait. When we finish Chamber of Secrets, you're like, oh, I cannot wait to get the Prisoner of Azkaban. When you finish with that book, you're like, oh, this is where it gets really good. When you finish with that and Order of the Phoenix, you're like, this is where it really starts. This is where the story gets insane. And then we all know after you finish Order of the Phoenix, Chamber or Half-Blood Prince is like where the story gets so meaty and so deep and so like fantastic. And then every chapter you just get more and more excited. And so that's my current tier list. Now my all-time favorite tier list is a little bit different. And this shifts very subtly, but it always starts with 2, then it always goes to 1. And then fortunately 3, again, even though I love the Quidditch stuff, I remember the first time I read it, I was so obsessed with the Quidditch stuff because we never got it in the first 2 books. We never got the culmination or the conclusion of Quidditch. We finally got it in 3. I love the Firebolt chapters. I love everything about this book so much. And then 4 is the next one after that. This book is fantastic. I loved how long it was. I loved Harry's courage in this book. And he's such an underdog in this whole story. But all time, this is where it sits. Then 7, I think 7 is an absolute masterpiece and an absolute marvel and a fantastic conclusion to the series. But these 2 books just are a little bit better for me. I love this book for the thematic reasons. I think this book is one of the most powerful books in the entire series, Order of the Phoenix. And it's not a very popular opinion because, a lot of people hate this book or it's on people's least favorite. But for me, I think it's my favorite. My second favorite, because of the adult themes that it touches on and because of Harry's moodiness and humanity here in this book, and how he finds community and how he is able to get through that and really become healthy. Because if you look at the first, if you look at this book compared to the third book, Harry makes mistakes in the third book and he still kind of gets angry about it. And sometimes he doesn't cope with his mistakes in the right way. He's still a remarkable person in the whole series. But in the end of Order of the Phoenix, just what he's able to do and how he's able to pull his friends around him is beautiful. I love this kid so much. And this is the book where I kind of really fell in love with him. And then I think 6 is just a masterpiece of a book. This is a lot of people's favorite book anytime I go through series and tier lists like this. But I think the 6th book is just where the story goes. I get so excited every time I crack open this book. And I still remember when I was reading the series for the very first time back in middle and high school. I read through all of them. She had just published 5 when I started reading. So I got to the 5th book, picked up the 5th book, and I had to wait about a year until she published this one. And then this was the book that I sat on the longest in between this and Deathly Hallows. And I remember rereading this book over and over and over again, sometimes for fun in class, or if I was just sitting at home, I would reread this stupid. I would reread the Spark Notes versions of this book just to refresh my memory on the actual story of it and to come up with different theories and things that I actually enjoyed about it, or just to remember it really quickly. And this book and how it switches from the kids wanting to be kids to such crazy and adult themes is beautiful. And as far as a chapter is concerned, I don't think there is a single more riveting chapter in this entire series other than the cave. It is, oh my gosh, that chapter, I think I was sweating bullets the first time I read that. I was in one of those moods when I read it where I was trying to get the information so fast and trying to flip the page so fast that I wasn't really reading it or retaining any of the information. So it took me twice the amount of time to read it, but I was flipping the page twice as fast. And I kept having to go back and trying to figure out what things were. And I was reading it so fast, but not retaining it or getting any of the information at all, because this chapter was just a marvel. And I think that sets up the rest of the 7th book to be so perfect and be the way that it was. So this is probably my favorite of all time. So that was a lot of information. But let me know. I have other tier lists as well. I don't want to go through all of them because this is already a 25-minute long video. But let me know what you think. I'm sure there's going to be tons of disagreement with this, and I'm sure there's going to be tons of people who think I am ludicrous in some of my rankings and tiers. So let me know what you think. Let me know what you would rank these books. I want your favorite the first time you read them. I want your favorite at the moment. I want, what you think is the best written, what you think is the best thematic book, and then give me your favorite of all time. But if you like this kind of stuff, make sure you subscribe. We come up with a bunch of Harry Potter nerdy stuff. My throat is all tickly because I've been talking for this entire time. I need some water. But subscribe to the channel. You can become a member as well. We're going to start picking up a book club, which is like, if you want to join for $5 a month, you can just join our book club. It's called Newt Level or Newt Discussions because we're all experts in Harry Potter. And subscribe, like the video. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you in the next one.